Alrighty, well, please feel free to continue to introduce yourself in the chat, but we are going to get started. I'd like to welcome you to today's Digital Service Network webinar titled Centering Accessibility in Hennepin County. I'm Beck Center Fellow Kirsten Wyatt, and it's my pleasure to moderate today's presentation. The Digital Service Network is a growing peer learning network that connects and supports digital service teams and professionals who use data, design, and technology to improve government services. One of the ways we do this is to uncover and share the resources to help build and grow digital service teams in local, state, provincial, and federal government. Today, we will share with you some important developments made by Hennepin County, Minnesota. The Digital Service Network is supported by the Beck Center for Social Impact and Innovation at Georgetown University and the U.S. Digital Response. If you haven't been to one of our events before, we can promise you that we'll make good use of your time. We'll talk like humans and not bureaucrats, and you'll learn something and meet somebody new. Today, we are so excited to have members of the Hennepin County Office of Digital Experience team join us. The DSN recently spoke with the team as part of our Spotlight series, a new learning series we've launched to lift up and humanize great digital government work happening across the field. We also include the artifacts or public goods driving the works showcased in our Spotlight series, so you can see how these tools, policies, and approaches work in practice. You can find the Spotlight on Hennepin County's work, the associated artifacts, and much more in the Digital Service Network Resource Library. Today, we are so pleased to welcome Megan Evans-Seeds, the Chief Digital Officer, and Lisa Gang, the Digital Accessibility Coordinator for Hennepin County. They will share more about the county's first digital accessibility policy and their work in centering accessibility and usability across Hennepin County government. And you'll have plenty of time to ask your own questions. This webinar is free, and a recording and a recap will be available online after this event for you to revisit or to share with your network. And if you're not yet a member of the Digital Service Network, we hope you'll sign up for our email list. You'll receive a monthly newsletter with a roundup of all things digital service. And we're also here to be responsive to what you need as a government employee. And we'll develop more webinars, articles, research, toolkits, and more based on what you're looking for to advance your work in your organizations. If you have questions during today's presentation, please use that chat box to ask your question. If it makes sense, I will interject and ask the question for you, or we'll wait until the end and make sure we have plenty of time for questions and answers. And as you can see, we will be very active in the chat, sharing links and information from our speakers today during the discussion. So keep an eye on that as well. So with that, it's my pleasure to hand it over to Megan and Lisa. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Kirsten. It's wonderful to be here. I know Lisa and I are both really pleased to be able to share our work with you. As Kirsten said, I'm Megan Evans-Seeds. I'm the Chief Digital Officer here at Hennepin County, joining you today from Minneapolis. I've worked in local government since about 2009 in a number of different roles, but I've been in this digital space since about 2014. And I'll hand it over to Lisa quickly for a brief intro.
Thanks, Megan. Hello, everyone. I'm Lisa Yang. My pronouns are she and her, and as Digital Accessibility Coordinator, I implement our digital accessibility policy and am a resource to help our county teams and employees. I'm really happy to be here with all of you.
So today, Lisa and I are going to be talking about the work that certainly she and I have done together, but we've done with dozens of allies throughout our organization. And that work is very much focused on how Hennepin County can provide digital information and services to everyone, regardless of ability. And that everyone is important because it includes both the community members that we serve, those who are seeking out information and services from our organization. It also includes the staff who every day are working to provide that service to our community. We're thinking about our community members today as well as in the future, because all of us are likely to experience a temporary, situational, or permanent disability at some point in our lives. So this work is really important work that benefits truly all of us. As I said, Lisa and I are both really proud to represent the work we're doing in our Office of Digital Experience, and that work is done in partnership with allies throughout our organization. And it's really focused on being intentional about ensuring that what we do is accessible, that the services are accessible. Because if we don't have that focus, the best we can expect is that things might perhaps be accessible, but more often they just are unintentionally inaccessible. One theme you'll hear from us repeatedly is that everyone really does have a role to play to ensure that the services we create are accessible to our community members. And as I said, we all benefit from that as well. Just to highlight a bit of what we'll talk about in this webinar today, Lisa will share a little bit of the context about our county and where we were sort of starting from on this journey. I'll talk a little bit about our digital experience model and the way it creates a foundation for this work. And then Lisa will detail more steps within that policy creation process ahead of naming what's next for us in our office and at Hennepin County, some of the key lessons we hope you're able to take away today. And we certainly want to make sure we have time for questions and discussion with all of you. Certainly, as you're listening to us today, we would love it if you think about what you're hearing that's similar or different to your own organization's journey. Think about what's been helpful or harmful to you as you've tried to move this work forward, where you're working from, and also think through how else we can be of help to you in your journey, because Lisa and I would certainly love to stay in touch with anyone who's interested after this conversation. And with that, I'll hand it over to Lisa for the next portion.
Thanks, Megan. Before I start, many of you may be wondering where Hennepin County is in Minnesota and how it's similar or different to your own organization. So I'll give some context here. Hennepin County is the state's most populous county. It includes the city of Minneapolis. And the graphic here shows Hennepin County is located closer to the southeast area of the state. And when we talk about making online services accessible, we're talking about serving all 1.28 million county residents. That is 1 in 5 Minnesotans who live in Hennepin County. And 10% of county residents have at least one disability. As for technology access, 96% have a computer and 93% have broadband internet. So our digital accessibility is one that your journeys maybe have some similarities with. Here I'm showing a timeline that gives an overview of how digital accessibility has progressed for us. On the left side of the timeline, way back in 2011, our Office of Communications launched the county's plain language program, and accessibility may not have been a very well-known topic or focus at that time, but becoming a plain language organization helped set a foundation and expectations for human-centered writing and design. So we built on that foundation with the creation of our web standards in 2014, which include accessibility standards and accessibility best practices. And then in our timeline here, you also see that a lot has happened in the past 4 years. In 2019, we asked our county attorney's office to research the county's legal obligations to provide accessible web experiences. And I'll share more on that later, but in short, they said we are legally obligated to provide an accessible website. In 2020, we contracted with a digital accessibility company called WeCo to audit our public website, some applications, and a few documents. WeCo is a digital accessibility company, and they employ people living with disabilities and lived experiences. And so they've helped us a lot throughout our journey. And we received WeCo's audit report right before the COVID-19 pandemic emergency announcement that led us to working remotely. And so trying to share and socialize the audit report while we were working remotely was a little bit different than being able to meet with people in person, but that report has really helped us kind of have a baseline for where we're at. While being remote, we created a user experience community of practice and leveraged Microsoft Teams to gather virtually every month. The UXCOP is open for any employee to join, and it's attended by developers, designers, writers, UX specialists, and anyone who influences our digital tools or wants to know more about UX, including accessibility. And so that group is a way for us to also review, refine, and update our web standards together. Also during that time, an external vendor called OST conducted a digital service assessment of the county, and we received their findings from that assessment. And with the leveraging of federal pandemic response funding, we were able to support some of our pilot work in the digital experience space. Then throughout 2021 and 2022, we established our structure called the digital experience or DX model, and work to fill some needed positions. Megan will speak more about the model in a little bit here. And we worked on and adopted our digital accessibility policy during that time. I'll delve into the policy work later too, like Megan mentioned. But that really, especially the policy helped enable new resources and support for employees to help meet the policy. We have, in 2023, we've listed several things there that's happened this year. We contracted with WeCo for their online and on-demand training courses for digital accessibility training. We're finding that as people are hearing about this policy, that they wanted resources and wanted to learn more. And so their WeCo's WeCollege learning platform has really helped us to give employees the knowledge that they need, the base foundational knowledge. And then our IT workforce and training team also created a course called Digital Accessibility Basics that they deliver on a monthly basis, live and in an online format. We created an accessibility statement page that communicates our commitment, progress, and plans. And it also makes it easier for our residents and our end users to find help and contact information. And we launched our program called the Digital Experience Champions Program to help build capacity in-house. It's open to all employees. They complete 12 to 14 hours of training and readings before taking an assessment exam. And then once they pass the exam, they become what we call a DX champion, which means that they help promote user-centered and racial equity principles. And they can be brought in by our office to help with work in the champion's own work area or with other opportunities throughout the county. So as we've been promoting and advancing digital accessibility and trying to bring awareness to it, a lot of employees, a lot of teams and areas have been needing consult and help that we just don't have in-house right now. And so we just recently contracted with WeCo to keep them on as a consultant for the next year and a half. This contract is managed by me because of my role, and also our office has put up some upfront funding to help pay for services, which is meant to make it really easy, really very possible for any area at the county to consult to get WeCo's services without having to go through RFP and contracting processes that could be lengthy and take up a lot of work or be a lot of work. So at the same time, that's not our long-term plan. As WeCo's services are being used, we will at the same time emphasize to county areas and teams that the value of accessibility so that they can plan ahead to include accessibility in their workflows, their timelines, and their budget. So I don't have this in the timeline, but I do want to mention that we are working on creating procedures that go with the policy. For example, how to address digital tools that aren't accessible. And I'm sure the creation and maintenance of those procedures will likely be an ongoing effort to some extent. My next slide here, partnerships. I just want to point out that a lot of this work really needs a lot of partnership internally. We've got a lot of engaged employees who have become advocates and allies. We, like I said, have asked for the county attorney's office for their help, and we've also worked with our broadband and digital inclusion team or office who focus more on trying to get residents access to technology, to devices, and helping them connect to the internet. Our human resources ADA coordinator, our IT community, including our training team in IT, and then our Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Outreach and Community Supports, which that team actually does the community engagement work that's necessary for us to hear from our community. So at this point, I also want to mention that these are partners that are outside of our DX model. And so within our model, we also have a lot of advocates in our teams who are also DX champions. And I'll turn over to Megan to talk more about our DX model.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, we did just want to detail a little bit what we call this digital experience model, because it's a type of structure that's really created an important foundation for the work that Lisa has led as our digital accessibility coordinator. So we have pictured here a pretty dry org chart, but the key point is to see that we have sort of 3 separate either offices or departments that host a partner team. And these teams are working together to provide that overall more consistent experience for our residents in the digital space. So we have a website communications team in the communications department that's every day focused on and maintaining our county websites and ensuring that everything is plain language and up to date and as accurate and easy to use as possible for our residents. We've also stood up a new web infrastructure team in our IT department to be tasked with supporting the backend infrastructure and the system administration of the different content management systems and servers that support our web presence. And then we created a new Office of Digital Experience, and this is what I lead and what Lisa and I are a part of. That's working to support that sort of the next generation of services that we provide online and ensure that they are as equitable and inclusive as possible as we go about doing that. So each of these teams has their own portfolio, can work very independently, but we also then coordinate joint work together and share out joint work to our stakeholders together. And we really want to prove that it's possible to coordinate work without having to be housed in a single department. We want to show that that kind of cooperative work structure is possible. And then, as I said, having allies in each of these partner teams who are all equally committed to accessibility goes a long way in growing out our county's approach to that initiative. But in perhaps a less dry way of capturing our work, on the next slide, we have those partners in person together working. So on the top left, we've got about 40 members of those partner teams, many of whom are in person, some are virtual, celebrating the end of a kickoff of one of those joint projects. And then also have about half a dozen of our Office of Digital Experience team members in the foreground picture. And I just want you to see how many happy allies we have working together in this work and sharing and coordinating in a way that brings those nearly fully staffed teams together to do work that supports that overall web experience for our residents. So Lisa's the coordinator, but she needs these allies to make the kind of progress we know that our community both expects and deserves. And I mean, just again, look how much fun we have when we do it. Lisa, I'll turn it back to you to dive into more of those policy details.
Yeah, on the screen here, I have a photo of a person sitting at a desk that has a refreshable braille device, and they're wearing headphones around their neck and holding a cell phone close to their face as they use a screen reader. Just wanted to give that visual, and I'll, like Megan said, delve into the policy itself, the process of adopting the policy, the implementation of the policy, and some lessons learned. If you haven't seen our policy yet, I'll bring it up here and share it on our screen. You can access it through the DSM Spotlight article because we shared it with the network as an artifact. So I think you all see it. Great. So I'll just kind of go through the structure of it and what it looks like to give you an idea. At the top here, and I should also preface with that we have a policy team at the county, and our policy experts already have kind of a template for the county to use when it comes to policies. And so we kind of we're trying to fit into that template and make things really plain language and easy to understand throughout this policy. So we have here our table of contents where we go through, the purpose, the scope and services, policy, including responsibilities, procedures and standards, definitions, and authority and context. So for purpose, the purpose section, we mainly talk about like, why does this policy exist? And it's mainly so that we can ensure that all people, including our employees, have access to digital tools that we create, and that we are trying to align with our disparity reduction goals. Oops, so sorry. And strategic direction toward operating as a hybrid workforce when it comes to our employees too. So our scope and services, we are including all external and internal digital products, both interface and end products, whether new or existing, for employees and the public. And then our policy here just kind of states like what is that we are expecting, which is to provide our products in a way that's accessible, that meets our web and digital accessibility law standards and best practices. Then down below we have, and I should also mention, like, this includes third-party tools as well, including social media, including tools like Microsoft that we use all the time. Then we have our main responsibilities, and we have digital experience, our office named here, that we will, we will ensure that sites are following this policy, and also that we have a pattern and component library and web standards that we will maintain, and that there's a digital accessibility coordinator within that office, and that again would be me, and my role is to develop and provide procedures to ensure that there's training, and to find that training, to guide the selection of training, and to be an advocate for all the tools that we make available for our employees and bring awareness to them. We also have department responsibilities, that what departments are responsible for when it comes to ensuring their employees are getting the knowledge and the training that they need, and the expectations for developers, designers, for project team members, all of those roles. And then our procedures standards section names WCAG. We follow WCAG 2.1, AA, and AAA when we can. We have our own standards, and then our definitions for digital accessibility and digital product are below. In an updated version of this policy, we also include what digital experience means too. And then we have the laws that we follow that apply to us and our owners and contacts for the policy. So hopefully that gives you some good context. I'm going to switch back over to our slideshow. Okay, so with the policy, kind of our first steps were with the policy was to at least try and bring attention and focus to digital accessibility. Everyone was, some people were working on including digital accessibility, some were kind of still learning about it, some weren't prioritizing as much as others. And so we wanted to try with the policy to have kind of a top-down approach, because we were working very heavily on having a bottom-up approach. So this policy was kind of meant to help us, in order to do that, we went to the county attorney's office, like I mentioned earlier, to learn about our legal obligations. And they gave us a memo after doing the research that concluded that the county does have a clear obligation to provide its websites, its services and communications accessibly, including its website. Then at the same time, in the policy, or in the memo, I'm sorry, they listed laws that the county must follow. They also listed a couple of legal actions and cases as examples. And then they also gave us some recommendations for what are some next steps that we should take. And one of those steps are to get an audit from an external vendor for our website, so that we can know where we are at and have a baseline status. Other recommendations were, to comply with WCAG and WCAG guidelines, and to create a digital accessibility plan. And so since then, we've been working steadily on meeting those, meeting those recommendations to implement longer term solutions too. So when it came to creating the policy, we first began to get support and look to our technology policy committee. So the technology policy committee had members including the chief information officer, business information officers, and those who have expertise in technology, legal, data, and communications. And with their support, we went ahead and began working on drafting a policy. We created a work group for drafting that policy and for reviewing that policy. We included others that weren't already part of that committee, like designers, UX specialists, other developers, GIS, the HR80 coordinator, just to name a few. And we started with a template that WeCo provided us, which then turned into a draft that over several working sessions became a more revised draft that we felt like we could be comfortable with. And with that revised draft, we went back to the Technology Policy Committee to present it and to continue to get their endorsement. And with their endorsement, we sought support from our top leadership who approved the policy. And then it was adopted into our county admin manual, our county administration manual, which made it official, which made it visible. And since then we've really kind of referred back to it quite a bit as we work on digital accessibility and trying to make the case for it. So as part of my role in that policy, it was stated that I would also try and find training and help build capacity and any knowledge in-house. And so we are working with our other areas like the IT workforce training team that I mentioned earlier, that because of this policy that we were able to put together, they then were able to make the case for creating a digital accessibility basics course. And so just having the policy and having all those partners in as part of this policy writing or drafting helped them to kind of create their own efforts that aligned with the policy, if that makes sense. Some challenges we talked about, especially in the work group, we talked a lot about creating procedures before even creating a policy. There are questions around how can employees follow policy when there are no procedures to follow, and which comes first, the policy or procedures. And we felt that it was important to prioritize the policy because then it ensures that procedures and support can be made available and are created. We also had a lot of discussions around what the policy should include, if it should be internal facing and for employee, and should it include employees, should it include all digital tools? And we said, yes, it should. There are questions around like, should there be exceptions for tools that are inaccessible or for legacy systems that just can't be accessible at all anymore? And with guidance from our policy experts, we decided not to include exceptions and instead recommend that in our procedures we create include how to address tools and systems that aren't accessible. And then another thing was if we should include procedures in the policy, within the policy, and our policy experts already had a best practice in place for that, which is no procedures are separate, but that once we create them, we can refer to them and link to them within the policy. Insights that we had from our policy work is to partner with emerging allies, that we build allies as we go, we build relationships as we go, and from there we get more advocates and we get more people to help us with the work and to bring awareness to digital accessibility. We've learned that we really do need to have dedicated roles and teams to drive digital accessibility and equip those folks with the things that they need to implement the policy and to manage that work. There's also the responsibilities are pretty clear in the policy, but at the same time, our message and the notion is that everyone must help to enforce this policy. That was another question that we had during drafting, was who's going to enforce this, and we need to name someone that's going to enforce this policy. And so we kind of separated that a little bit, said, everyone's got responsibilities in their own role, but when it comes to enforcing, everyone needs to feel like they are part of enforcing this policy. So everyone has a role to play. Our next steps with the policy are to continue to socialize it and communicate to employees about it, to create procedures, of course, and to address inaccessible sites, to make it easier for people to ask questions, to submit complaints, to let us know if they've experienced something that's inaccessible so that we can address it. And also, how do we ensure that we're procuring tools that are accessible, or that in our contracts we're making it a requirement that vendors and third-party tools are going to work on accessibility with us. And then how we can continue to support employees so that they can meet the policy. And that includes, improving our trainings, making it easier to find standards and guidelines and accessible code. We are building a design system right now where all of our standards, our guidelines, our best practices will be housed. And this design system will actually replace our web standards, our writing guide, our pattern and component library that I mentioned earlier. It's supposed to be our one-stop place for all of those things. And we will also include a lot of accessibility information as a way to kind of provide some micro learning as people are just, trying to get into the design system and get what they need. And our accessibility statement page, we will add more to that and provide more information to that and be more open with our residents and public about where we're at with digital accessibility and how they can get help and assistance too. So, and then our user experience, community practice, and our digital experience champions, we're continuing to make progress there too and get more people to participate. So some key lessons that we've learned, not just with the policy, but overall in our journey. Partnerships have been very key for us to help build momentum, to continue the momentum and for inclusion of ideas, perspectives, and expertise. We found that, sharing information that was directly related to the organization to help bring awareness and attention really helped and really showed what is the impact to Hennepin County if we don't make things accessible, where are the risks, things like that. And then dedicating people and resources to support implementation to drive the work has been just probably the biggest thing that's helped, because without it, we just wouldn't have any focus on it and it would kind of be done in silos. And so, and then especially now that we have the policy, we're working to build capacity, like I said, with our DX Champions program, with UXCOP, and with our design system to have a wider reach and to get more advocacy and more allies. And then we found that investing in an external expert to help fill in any resource or knowledge gaps have been really, really helpful. Just to know that we're not going to be alone in this, and that wherever we may have some gaps or needing some extra hands, that we have someone on the outside who can give us their expertise or their feedback and give us their help. So that's all I have. I'll hand it over to Megan.
Thanks, Lisa. So that kind of concludes our presenting portion of detailing out our journey, but we would love to hold some time here for questions you might have about what we've experienced, or as I said earlier, would love to hear from you on what stands out that's similar or different to your own journey.
Thank you so much, Megan and Lisa, for sharing with us today. And as a reminder, please use that chat feature if you have some questions for them, but I have a couple that came in. The first is around the support and training and capacity building that you've built into this. What have you observed has been the most used or what has been the question that you've been most often asked as others think about ways that they build capacity and support in their own organization? Or is there a topic area, I guess, maybe?
Lisa, do you want to start by talking about the questions you receive most as our coordinator?
Yeah, there's a couple. One is how do we fit this into our workflow? How do we implement it in our teams? Which is always tricky because I think people think it's going to be a really big change when really it could be kind of seamless because we have a lot of checklists available and you could just kind of incorporate that into your workflow, into your process. And it just then becomes very natural. And once you get into it, you just naturally start to see things that are inaccessible, or you just, have that checklist in your mind and you're like, oh, I know what to look for. And it just becomes part of your work. I think sometimes checklists can be seen, accessibility checklists can be seen a bad thing, or oh, we don't want to just be oh, yay, we checked these things off, we're good. And that's not what it is. And it shouldn't be that way. It's more it's another tool to help you, in your work. And as you find things, you can maybe even add more to your checklist, or you could even do things that are outside of the checklist. And so that's something a question I've received a lot. And then another one is, how can we do testing with people with disabilities? And that one's tricky because we also don't have that in-house either. And we do rely on WeCode to do that for us. But I always say it is a really big, production, I suppose. Like, you have to prep for that, and you have to have some expertise around how to facilitate and do that kind of testing. And so it's probably even more helpful to look at, okay, what kind of automated testing can I do first? What kind of manual testing can I do first? What things can I check for first? And so that I can ensure that I'm doing my part to ensure that something's accessible before I put it out to the world. And it may be helpful, to get in front of other people, like people who have color blindness or vision deficiencies or impairments, and just get them to use it really quickly and see what they're able to find. But hopefully you've done your part first to make sure something's accessible before you put it in front of others, if that makes sense.
I might add, Lisa and I were just talking earlier about how the policy played a huge role in just giving everyone permission to think about it and to bring it into project conversations as early as possible. Because having that policy just makes clear that's the expectation for all of us, whether you're requesting work of others, whether you're the one doing the design or development work, rather than like an office like ours perhaps seeming to like impose a new mandate on someone or something like that. I don't think we've run into anyone who's opposed to making our services accessible, but trying to build that new muscle to include a new type of, whether it's a checklist or understanding for what project success looks like. I think all of us in government know that kind of change can be hard, even when everyone's on board. So helping people along the way to kind of build the muscle and the skill set to just be aware and know how to incorporate this in as early as possible in their project flow goes a long way.
We have another comment here from Alice, sharing another vendor that hires testers with disabilities, make it safe for that. So next question actually goes along quite well with what you were just speaking of. I mean, it's kind of that culture shift, or like that building muscle and making that change. Any tips or suggestions for how you built some of those partnerships, and then especially interested in how you worked with hesitant or resistant departments or people who didn't have time or had excuses at every turn.
Yeah,
Lisa, maybe I'll mention just one thing at the outset, because you already talked about that user experience community of practice, and that group predated our accessibility policy work. So we sort of had a group of, we'll just say predisposed or like ready to be allies, waiting in the wings for this question to come up. And we tried to do as much as we could on like an opt-in basis. So having places where we were already talking about accessibility just generally, and then getting to a place where we're finally ready to say, now we're wanting to do this policy, like who's ready to join us. I think some of that pre-work helped a lot. And Lisa was a part of that. And our whole Office of Digital Experience was a big part of creating that group in the first place. So kind of the pre-work, honestly, I think was important to creating an environment for this conversation. What would you add, Lisa?
I think you covered it really, really well. Yeah, just finding people who have similar mindset, who are already interested in accessibility or wondering about it, or who already work on the web and, have kind of aligned goals. That's really helped.
But thinking about those who might still be resistant, again, not to the concept, but just to how to fit this in. Maybe some attorneys in your organization, perhaps, and they might be interested to know that there are a continuing slate of lawsuits being filed every day by people who are not able to access service. And few organizations want to invite that kind of attention. So another angle that we haven't really had to wield too much, but we do want to make sure that we're moving forward in a way that's mindful of not creating additional risk, and delivering inaccessible service is certainly delivering a type of risk out to your community. So sometimes that can catch people's attention if they're not already raising their hand to join in.
I'll leave the Q&A open for another minute or two if anyone else has a question or even a comment or a perspective you'd like to share about your organization and your policy or lack of policy, perhaps that you'd like to share. But while we wait for another question to come in, I just want to make sure that you all have that link again to become a member of the DSN, and just make sure that you get updates about events like this one that come up. And so we'll get that link for you there in the chat. And then again, a huge part of what the work that the DSN does is to do spotlights like this one and then share out the artifacts. And so in addition to hearing the story about the work in Hennepin, you can also check out their policy, get links to all of the great work that they've been doing. We know that often in government, it is the R&D process is rip off and duplicate. And so if you can take their policy and run with it, go for it. And then lastly, just want to make sure that you have the chance to give us feedback on this event and anything else you'd like to see the DSN pursue to make your life a little bit easier. So we do have a quick feedback form that we would welcome your comments on if you have a minute. So we'll wait here for another second. But while we do that, why don't we see if Megan and Lisa have any closing thoughts or perspectives they'd like to share with this great group today.
This won't be quite a closing thought, but one additional thought I'm having at this moment that we haven't talked about yet is the tremendous number of lessons we can have or learn from the physical accessibility progress that's been made in public organizations, everywhere, ever since, was it 91 when the ADA was first signed? Mm-hmm. Your facility services department probably knows a lot about how to make a building accessible. And many staff are still around to talk about what kind of challenge or lessons learned they've collected from implementing new legislation in the built world. Digital is not at a point where it's as universal as it is in the physical space, but people can understand why everyone benefits from having ramps to a building entrance, why everyone benefits from having curb cuts at an intersection. Those are things like government's pretty familiar with. And the more we can do to draw parallels between the physical and the digital space, as far as a way that connects people to service, I think goes a long way. So I think somewhere on that timeline, Lisa, I can't recall where, but there was sort of an accessibility group that had started up. And I think the originator of it was out of our facilities department, and that person's no longer with our organization, but it was half a dozen people at most who just really wanted to talk about how to continue improving. So I think we owe credit to that group for helping light a fire under us as well.
Yes, definitely. I forget what the group was called, which is kind of a bummer, but had the word accessibility, and I think they were really good advocates in there. And there was someone from the transportation department who was there as part of the group, and facility services, like Megan said. So it was a small group, but it was very it had a lot of strength in it to try and bring awareness to accessibility. Yeah, and just tagging on to what you were saying earlier, Megan, about the ADA that was signed on July 26th, 1990. I think today is July 25th, and so tomorrow's the 33rd anniversary of the ADA being signed into law. And it was actually modeled after the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So it's interesting that it came so much later, the ADA, as well. And I think there's some, context there of how far we are from making things accessible. So even though I'm very proud of the work that we're doing, we also have a long ways to go to make sure that, people with disabilities, whether invisible, short-term or long-term, have the tools and the things that they need to access government services. A lot of times we require that they, use our services. And so it just doesn't feel right to say you have to do it, but we're not going to make it easy for you. So.
Yeah, I think that's just it, Lisa. If we're not creating bridges to service, we might accidentally be creating moats. And I don't think that's what we're all in the business of doing.
Well, you said it best. We've come a long way, but we have a ways to go. Thanks to your generosity of your time, the chance to feature you in a spotlight, the chance to add these artifacts from your organization to the library. You're helping all of us take those next steps. So thank you very much for spending time with us today. For everyone in attendance, stay in touch. Let us know what topics you'd like to hear about next from the Digital Service Network. Sign up for our email list. And most of all, just thank you for spending time with us this afternoon. And thank you, Megan and Lisa, for all of your incredible work in Hennepin County. Take care, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everyone.